Hi, I'm Holly Fairley, and I'm here with my lovely sister-in-law, Shay Fairley, and we're going to do a bit of a chat on astrology and the current um, intense and transformative energies that are up in the sky affecting us at the moment. It's currently the 30th of November, and we have the full moon tonight at like 8:30 p.m. And we've got a series of eclipses happening the next few months, something like that. So Shay's going to tell us a bit about it. As above, so below, everything that's happening up in the sky is affecting us. So it's important to have an idea of what's going on and what we can do to cultivate the energies, the transformative energies of the moon and the stars.
Yes.
We'll start with the moon, I guess, because it is the full moon today.
Yeah. Okay, so the full moon, whenever the sun is in a sign, a particular sign, and the moon's in the opposite, when we've got a full moon arrangement. So at the moment, we're in Sagittarian sun territory. So the moon's in Gemini. So this full moon's peaking in Gemini. When it's the eclipse, the nodal axis, it joins it there. So the south node, which the south node in astrology is like the karmic past, the cellular memory from that's sort of like imprinted into that subconscious, like of what's come before. So when we're talking about big pictures of like, previous lifetimes and incarnations, then the south node is like it's where someone it's the most imprinted energy that a soul comes into this life with. So for example, even though I'm a Pisces sun girl, my south node is Aquarius. The whole theme of 2020, we know that it was always going to be big because huge cycles, like I've said lots of times on my recordings, huge cycles are ending, big yugas are ending, which span like 26,000 years. And it's the end of a great age. So we're moving into the age of Aquarius. So we've moved out of the age of Pisces because the great ages, like the nodes themselves, move backwards through the zodiac instead of forwards like the other signs, like the other planets. And so we've come out of the age of Pisces, and we know that it's also the breakdown of the patriarchy. So for the last 2,500 years we've been on Earth. Earth's been in patriarchal rulership.
I think 5,000 years, I reckon.
Yeah.
My understanding. Yeah, long time.
Yeah, and
so that's masculine dominance, like worshipping sun gods and masculine rule, kings and politics and governments, where before that it was feminine rulership, it was goddesses and more connection to the earth and the moon, more living in harmony with nature, and now it's all about money and power.
Yeah. So in 2020, the breakdown of the patriarchy was always like crumbling, and whether the breakdown of the patriarchy was going to be like a gentle turn into the matriarch, or whether it was going to be a really intense transformation. When we're moving into when the endings of huge cycles that are happening like they are this year, then the endings always it's intense, because as we get to the end of something, it intensifies before it has to annihilate, to break down. And we always knew that at the end of the patriarchal times, that anyone that was still representing patriarchal paradigm and that was still aligned with those values were going to try at all costs to keep that going. So that all of the shadows then of the collective are sitting on the surface, and we can see them more now. And what happens when they're sitting on the surface is that everybody has to do their part to transmute those shadows, even the personal shadows, as well as the shadows that are happening in the collective. And with people that are not wanting to move into matriarchal rulership, and it's an unconscious thing, but people that are not wanting to move, then with all their shadows, instead of exposing them and being willing to do the work to transform, it actually comes across as then more manipulation, more power games, more distortion, more corruption, and everything that we've been able to see directly or indirectly this year. But what with the South Node, where that's really important, is because the South Node's our memory, as well as our trauma, as well as things that have come before in previous incarnations. This year in 2020 particularly, our South Nodes are being really hit, and people are getting really confused with like what's real and what's not, and what's true and what's not. Because if you think about that, if there's been people that before the patriarchal times have actually worked for them, and their memory of it was that they were in power, and they were told in power that they were the right ones, they were the ones that were in the right, and then they were told to, like, you know, whatever they were told to do to suppress the people that they decided throughout patriarchal systems weren't worthy, then in their memory they still feel like they're right and that this system works. And so there's a real struggle to let that break down. Whereas for other people who their heart always more aligned with the previous times when we were in previous matriarchal rulership, where we were aligned much more to spirit and nature, and where values such as like you know, equality, shared visions with spirit, like psychics, prophets, mystics, astrologers, all of those things in our heart that meant the most. It's like a real time of excitement for people who had that in the heart, because the whole time through the patriarchal times, it was something that was very upsetting to the people that knew in their hearts that that was a better alignment to truth back in the matriarchy. So they're excited to move into this new age, but the people that the patriarchal system worked well for, they're really scared. And as we know, humans don't like change because it's the fear, it's the unknown, it's not knowing what's coming next. But then even people that really aligned with matriarchal truth and were really like very well connected to the land, and in the previous matriarchy, even they might have experienced a lot of trauma during patriarchal times where they were killed. And it's not just a thing to say that witches were killed. It happens over and over again in many ways, like beheaded, like
it wasn't even witches, it was all the midwives, the herbal healers, like any powerful woman was killed or made, you know, called a witch just because she might have been a bit intuitive or a little bit different or powerful, because
it was a threat to the patriarchal
masculine.
And this actually all began with a lot of this with Lilith, with the archetype of Lilith. So we've been looking a lot into Black Moon Lilith. It's been coming up so strong for this year. And Black Moon Lilith, like in the matriarchy, the times were very different. Like women were sort of really worshipped for their ability to initiate men into the art of love. They were worshipped for their psychic ability. Everyone had their place, like on what, and it all was in tune exactly with what you would find in nature. And then Lilith was, you know, she was a massive threat. So the story of Lilith is like Adam and Lilith like are born out of the earth as clay sculptures, and as soon as consciousness is infused, they're in a power struggle and they don't know what to do. And Adam says that Lilith has to be on the bottom and Adam has to be on top, and Lilith is like, no way. So she takes off and she doesn't want any part of Adam. She doesn't care for those things. And you know, and then God said to have sent these angels to go and find Lilith, and she's like free on the beach naked and enjoying nature, and she's wild and free, and she does not care about coming back to Adam. And then the angels are trying to get her to come back, and then God says to Adam, now what do you want to do? And he's like, I want another woman that's more equal to me. So God takes one of Adam's ribs out and infuses Eve into his rib, and then Eve's just born out of Adam's rib, and then the beginning of the patriarchy begins. So then Eve's she's more the housewife, but she's domesticated, she's tame, she's
subservient.
she's passive, and Lilith's active, and that passivity worked well for the patriarchal story. And so anything that represented anything to do with Lilith, Black Moon Lilith during the patriarchal times, was a massive threat to the story of where the Bible was fabricated and changed, because anything like if a woman was like free, or if she was like, then she's like labeled a prostitute, and she has to marry one man and stay at home and look after the children, have no access to her own power or money. And so then now it's the return of Lilith, but this time it's really different. And what I love about the story is Pell, this guy I was watching, who has done a lot of research on Lilith and spent most of his life like researching Lilith. He said what really needs to happen now is that for the next matriarchal return where we're going in our cycle to happen, there needs to be an integration of Lilith back in. But who needs to allow Lilith back in is Eve, and to recognize, and Eve needs to accept Lilith back in and say, actually, we're one and the same person. There's two sides to the woman. There's like, because with the menstruation cycle and the moon phase itself, it's always changing cycle, and just like women have a menstruation cycle. And so Lilith, embracing Lilith back in is to say that, yeah, the moon has a light side, the moon has a dark side. Women can have more Eve qualities, and that's beautiful. Like if a woman's more inclined to the Eve story, which is like, like nurturing the children and being domesticated and looking after the man, and that's a beautiful thing if that's what the woman's like in being pulled towards. Or if a woman's more got qualities that embrace Lilith, where she's like wants to be free and wild and untamed by the story that we've told, or the narrative, then that needs to be let back in as well, and appreciated in an infusion. And where we move now, when we move back into this matriarchal time, it's not the same as the previous matriarchy, because the previous matriarchy, we were living on the land, Native American Indians, Aboriginals, we were living on the land, and it was, but we were still quite barbaric. Like it was still very lower chakra stuff, because we still, even though we were in close nature with spirit, and that was more like, that had a higher value, but what was happening then was still like threat of survival, like killing other tribes, like going, really primitive, like survival patterns were still the highest. When we were going back into this next matriarchal rulership, it's going to be totally different. Obviously, we're not all going to move away from our houses and live back on the land, but it is it's going to have to infuse both. And that's why even Lilith come together, because it's going to have to infuse the both archetypes, where we are living much more back in appreciation to nature, but we're much more equal, and we're much more like all the discrimination of race, and the discrimination and inequality of money and resources, and the discrimination that's occurred through the patriarchal society, which is very on a hierarchy. That's what's going to break down, because we need to come into a community and start to care and share. And so on this particular eclipse, because the south node, so the south node's Gemini that we're on, the axis at the moment is the south node of Gemini, and that's where the moon is. So whenever the moon is on,
it's north
node's Saggy with the sun.
I thought it was the other way around. Okay.
So is that right?
No,
south node.
It's the other way around, because it's the same as Josh's.
We might have to look.
Hang on, we're going to get the chart up anyway. I'm pretty sure it's the other way around, just because Josh's is the same. Oh no, North Node Gemini.
North Node Gemini. Oh, so yeah, South Node Saggy. South Node Saggy with the sun in Saggy.
Yeah. And then
and North Node
with the moon.
Yeah, North Node's with the moon. So South Node Saggy.
This is the North Node, if anyone doesn't know what they are. And then the South Node is 180 degrees.
Yeah, so it'll just be there.
Just
before the sun. Okay, so South Node Sagittarius, Okay, so when it's on the South Node is bringing up karmic memory of the past. Now, Sagittarius it's one of the signatures of the shaman, because the shamanic signatures get rulership with Sagittarius alignment and also with Scorpio alignment for different reasons. Scorpio, because it's always working with the light and the dark. So the Scorpio signature is always on the bridge of the light and the dark, like coming in and trying to find out, like, our own shadows and how they interact and transform with the light. But when it's Sagittarius, it's Sagittarian South Node is like times where a person went off into the wild, into nature, and had a shamanic initiation where they got to experience like truth, like what is, when I'm on my own undisturbed by information that's coming through from someone else, what is the truth of the land, what is the truth of the spirit, like what is actual true by my connection with absolute truth. And so even though we know that the only truth is our own truth, Sagittarians were very, like, Sagittarian energy is very much about exploring my own truth, and they do it directly through intense experiences with living wild on nature, like wild in the nature, and just actually going and exploring, like, how, when I have a full experience out in the desert, what truths do I come across? Or when I lie under the stars, like, and experience the stars being infused down in me, what truths do I come across? So Sagittarius is only ever interested in truths that are through their direct experience. And so when the moon's there, when the sun's there with the South Node, it's getting a chance to for the consciousness of this, which is what the sun represents, to go back on cellular past memories of truth and try to revisit what is my own absolute truth on this, not what I'm being told, because we're being led a lot of confusion now. Obviously, like, if people are more inclined to listening to the mainstream narrative, then they're going to be very much getting told a completely different version of truth than people who are more going and indulging in conspiracy theories, which are going to get another whole set of truth. But in between that, it's very hard to discriminate or decipher, like, what is my own truth. And so for the shamanic Sagittarian energy, it was actually leaving altogether the village or the people and going, actually, I need a period of initiation on my own where I'm on my own to explore my own truths and what is, like, totally true by my experience of directly from nature, not from what I'm being told by someone else. And so that's when the sun's there, it's a chance for us to consciously become, because the sun's consciousness, it's consciously try to go and remember, what is my truth? Do I have any memory of those times? What do I actually think now that's totally, and believe on a really deep level of intuition that's different to what I've been told or surrounding me at the moment, that's very confusing. Like, and then when the North Node, Gemini, is with the moon, so when the North Node's with the moon, it's emotionally, because the moon's there emotion, it's the emotions and the karma because the moon's also karma, and so is the South and North Node axis. It's a karmic axis. It's the soul's karmic evolution through this lifetime, and where the soul's trying to evolve to. And when it's trying to evolve now towards, like, say, this axis particularly, we're trying to get to Gemini, it's actually trying to bring that truth, that intuitive truth, our own truth, into something that can actually be directly, like, bridging the gap now of, like, those realms, and actually emotionally heal, because when the moon's there, the moon's, like, emotionally trying to heal something, and so this whole theme is, like, really big. And actually, I was thinking of something yesterday too, which was, I was reading Earth Magic, Stephen Farmer, and he has a deck of cards with it, but I was starting to read the book, and he said, the shamanic path is the path of the healer and the path of the earth. It's not the path of the mystic, even though mystical information is infused into that shamanic quality. And I was thinking very much yesterday, and I was like, that's so true. But I really think now that as we move into the next matriarchy, that actually both of them will be the one and the same. So I was thinking, why can't the shaman be the healer, but also the mystic? because a lot of that mystical information obviously gets downloaded from above and then from spirit, and then the shamanic information is coming from the earth itself. And like, how does the earth, what is the earth directly showing us? Like, what are the animals and the plants directly telling us? Like, what message is in those animals and those plants? And that's the shaman. But if them two infuse now, like, one's coming from the earth and one is coming from the heavens, and they're infusing, this is Gemini, because Gemini is the bridge between the earth and the divine, coming down and bringing itself into something. And it's like, that's why Gemini is like a channel, or the messenger between heaven and earth. Like, and I thought very much about that, and I was like, these two, we're coming into a time when we can infuse this, and the same with infusing Lilith and Eve, and the same with infusing masculine and feminine energy. And it's not the return of like women in power, it's actually going to be the return and the healing of both. Because there's many women right now on earth that haven't spent a lot of time in male bodies. So it's this infusion. And the other thing that's really interesting that's come up from Beatrice is, she said to consider, even the Buddhic path was always very concerned with how to infuse God into our body and be through mindfulness and presence, whereas the yogic path was interested in, how do I transcend this place altogether? I just, like, they're interested in getting rid of karmic accumulation so that they can transcend and never have to come back here, because they saw that, yes, this is a great opportunity, but this is ultimately, earth is a place of where we learn our lessons, and with that comes a lot of suffering. So they wanted to clean their karmic slate so that they never had to come back. Whereas Buddhas were like, the Buddhic path was like, actually, it's a total blessing to be in a body on earth. So why can't I find peace and happiness whilst I'm here, instead of just seeing it through suffering? And these two paths also need to infuse. So it's like the infusion of all of it. Yes, create heaven on earth from both perspective. From, yes, okay, there is challenges, there's suffering. Yes, okay, it's part of our lesson and why we're here. But there is also so much that is suffering because we've gone through a distorted system of the patriarchal times, which led to so much unnecessary suffering. But then it wasn't unnecessary, because it's all perfect, because that's where we contracted that we needed to go through to experience ourselves. Because if we just stayed in Eden all along, they said we would never even appreciate Eden. If we didn't go to the opposite, we would never actually come back onto itself and see those lessons. And so this, for me, this axis is so powerful, because it's like we infuse. And so many people, like, I watched I think Vic, another astrologer that Josh did some work with, and I love his talk too, but he said, constantly I'm being asked by people like, oh, hurry up and tell me what's going to happen, and is next year going to be better, because this year's been a shit fight. But it's like, it's necessary. And it's been like, whoa, it's the when something's breaking down massively, it's always a massive opportunity as well to transform and to heal and to go through that intensity. And escaping it is actually not going to put us through it. But trying to be like the Buddha, which is, okay, we understand there's suffering, but I also understand that this is a blessing, and that I soul contracted to be here at this time. So if I'm going to be here, how can I actually do what I'm here to do? And how can I help people transition through this time, and still at the same time, like, eradicate some of my karmic imprints and move into a new world to create the better world that we're all trying to create. So yeah, so eclipses are always more intense, because the energy is obviously intensified. The nodal axis is the same as the sun and the moon. It's an intense, it's hitting the points of the sun and the moon even more when the eclipse, because it is the karmic soul's journey through itself. So yeah,
Is that like bringing out more shadows and truth through that? Because
Yeah.
the eclipse is sort of like the light's turning to the dark, or the dark's turning to the light,
Yeah.
with the full moon.
Yeah. And then the full moon's always that. It's always, as well, a full moon opportunity is always where, because you get two eclipses, you get a new moon eclipse and a full moon eclipse. But the eclipse on the full moons were always for that. Like the new moons are potent in themselves because it's the sprouting of a new intention. Yeah. But the full moon is actually where the biggest luminaries in our world, our sun and our moon, are shining directly on each other. And it's the biggest opportunity for conscious awareness, because like your unconscious or subconscious shadows have consciousness of the sun shining on it. So it's like, here you go, here's an opportunity to see your shadow, your own shadow, as well as the shadows of the collective, and go, what am I going to do about that? Like, what if I've got my own shadows, what am I going to do? Am I going to throw and project it back out there into blame or anger of the world that the 2020 is too hard and that everyone's like corrupt and stuff? Or am I going to take it into my inner landscape and go, what do I want to do through this? Like, what do I want to be? Like, what's my intention constantly every day to get through this period?
Yeah, that's nice. So some practical tools. That's a nice level of awareness, but what kind of practical tools could you use to get through this phase? And there's like a series of eclipses or something, and wild things going on for a little while. So it's like we've just come out of Scorpio season, which feels like a bit of a relief, but there's still
so we'll have a new moon eclipse, which will be the double Sagittarian energy coming in 2 weeks time. When we hit the new moon, that will be the south node of Sagittarius will be with the sun and the moon, so they'll all be shining on that, which will be like lots of truth.
2 weeks time. Keep an eye out.
I wonder.
An eye in.
It's very funny because anyone that actually ever has looked into Donald Trump's chart, he's very much on this Sagittarius. He's got
it's the same. It's the sun. Sagittarius.
Yeah, he's got the sun in Gemini with the south node. And I think the moon, the south node in Sagittarius, he's got the same axis that we're on now, coming from Sagittarius to Gemini, but his sun's with the south node instead of the sun with the north node. But there's still...
So it's like today, but flipped.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. But so the month ahead is still, when we come into the new moon, so those truths are going to be even more... Like, you're going to still, during this eclipse period, you're still going to have the next 2 weeks where you'll really get an opportunity to explore your truth, which is supposed to be separate to actually what you're just being told. Even though Gemini is very much about researching and listening to other people's opinions and stuff, and the intellect and trying to intellectualize information, Sagittarian's not like that. It's trying to go into the intuitive part of, where is this truth? Like, what is it for me when I'm undisturbed by the chatter?
So I'm feeling lots of alone time in nature, lots of journaling, lots of ocean swims, connecting with your own truth, processing that, and then being aware of that will help you decipher the external truths.
Absolutely. Like breath work and breath work, and then journaling, because journaling, like you know how with sometimes when you're journaling, and it's a Sagittarian, I mean it's getting the truths of Sagittarian energy into the Gemini realm, where you're like Gemini still like communication and written communication as well as verbal communication to express them truths. But when you journal or you write and reflect, things that you don't even like consciously are thinking about actually start to really come out. So like channeling is another one that's on this axis of Sagittarian to Gemini, channeling. And I know Lee Harris is very big for like everyone can do it. All you have to do is like, I draw in my truth and I draw in my higher self to come in my soul to actually be with me now and share with me what am I, and then when you start writing,
a sacred space to step into that, and maybe a cup of cacao or something might be a good way to sort of start that.
Because then once you start writing, you're like, oh, I didn't realize there was that much in there, like that I couldn't have just said,
Cool.
Which always happens when I start rambling about astrology.
Yes.
Like,
we need more Instagram posts from you.
Yeah.
There's so much in there to be shared.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
But that was definitely big last night when I started thinking about what I would share. I don't even tend to look at the charts until the last minute, but when I'm like, oh, there's really, what I was given was like, yes, this, like, how do we infuse that, like, how do we infuse equality into moving into it, like how all of those paths, those sacred paths, like of truth, like the Buddhic path and the yogic path, and that, how do they come together and meet and infuse themselves? Like
Lilith and the Eve, that really resonated. Yeah, I feel like I've definitely been more of the Lilith archetype, and I've tried the Eve archetype out for a while, and Lilith's trying to come back.
Yeah.
It's
I know.
Definitely a Lilith time too.
Yeah, there's definitely exploration that's necessary around the Lilith archetype because she has been suppressed for so long. But then to find your own bridge of like, where like to go really wildly Lilith and then think, oh, actually I'm more like Eve in some way, then it's like it's both. They just need to join at your own point of where they infuse together.
Harmonize.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to pick a card for everyone. I like this deck. Yeah. When that happens. Eternity. This card is encouraging you to detach from the restrictions of your mind and look at your life from a more universal perspective. If you try to make your life fit entirely into human logic, you are always going to get to a point where it no longer makes any real sense. Trying to make sense of every part of your life is like trying to piece together a jigsaw puzzle while having only a few pieces of the puzzle in your possession. It is human nature to strive to work everything out and control things. Yet, the eternal nature of life is beyond human understanding. This message is for you at this time in your life is to focus on the spiritual side of life. Observe your thoughts and fears and consciously surrender them to the universe. Feel the spirit of nature and her changing seasons. Observe how all of nature is in perfect order, how she accepts all that transpires in the world. Rejoice in the feeling of timelessness that swells within your heart when surrounded by nature's beauty. Oh, so perfect. Always. Yeah. This is the deck in case anyone needs to know. Cool. Thank you, Shay. We're going to try and do stuff together regularly while we're in the same space. Physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And thanks, Shay.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to watch, and many blessings for the transitions ahead.